Howdy, welcome back to all the goths, gays, theys, and metal fans of all other denominations. Extreme metal is like hard liquor. Cheap beer and seltzers all have their place, just the same way that really palatable, light-hearted metal music all has its place. It's good to kind of ease people in. When someone tries wine for the first time, they're not going to be doing the thing where you sniff it and you swish it around and all that shit. They're probably just going to drink and be like, oh yeah, that tastes like red wine. It takes time. It's not their fault that they just haven't developed that understanding of all the subtle little nuances of something. And I think music is very similar in that sense, especially extreme metal music. There's a lot going on, and it can be pretty overwhelming at first. If you played someone some Obituary, Entombed, and Morbid Angel back to back who's never really listened to metal music before, they're probably not going to be able to tell the difference and say that it all sounds the same. Now, you say that to a death metal fan, they'll probably say that that's absolute blasphemy, and they'll probably call you a poser on Reddit. If you're watching this, you're probably also a metal fan, and you want to introduce your friends to this music that you're really interested in, but you don't know how to get them on board. As someone who struggles with this same problem, I've tried to come up with the path to slowly ease people in. So my whole theory on kind of how to go about this is based on my own experiences. Obviously, everybody's experiences will be unique to them. The first metal band that I can remember listening to was Avenged Sevenfold. My dad would play it in the car all the time when I was a kid. Most notably this album that you see behind me. Their self-titled was, I think, really ahead of its time, honestly, compared to a lot of that generation of metalcore, kind of emo, hard rock. I think a lot of people would call it dad metal these days. I remember being a young lad hearing the beautiful composition of A Little Piece of Heaven and then having my 7-year-old brain trying to rationalize the lyrics of that song, which if you know that song, you know it's fucking weird. But, it kind of put this idea in my head that you can have this very dark theme sound beautiful. I still love this album to death, and it put so many of these notions in my head very early on. Maybe to nobody's surprise, I grew up pretty emo, as you do. I listened to a lot of those big mid-2000s kind of emo hard rock bands. Harsh vocals were a turnoff for me for a long time, and it took quite a while to really get acclimated to them. But I think a lot of those bands like Dance Gavin Dance and A Day to Remember really had a very pivotal role in kind of adjusting me to that. I think you kind of need those songs where it just gets sprinkled into something that's a little bit more palatable. It wasn't really until my freshman year of college that I heard Silvera by Gojira, and that was kind of my first real delve into extreme metal that I was just like, oh, this sounds really good. Since then, I've never really looked back, but it still took maybe another year of listening to Magma to be able to go back and listen to Terra Incognita or The Link. Joe Duplante's vocals get a lot lighter as they progress in their discography, and so starting there and moving my way backwards was actually a really easy way for me to get introduced into Gojira's unique style of extreme metal, which I think is probably more palatable than many. Now I can appreciate bands like Cattle Decapitation, Archspire, Brand of Sacrifice, Dark Throne. It just takes time to learn and understand kind of what the subtle nuances of these bands are. In putting all of these bands together, I kind of noticed that there were two trends that emerged, and I put together this Venn diagram, and we will place each band on the Venn diagram to help understand why this band is a good kind of introduction into extreme metal for one reason or another. The first trend that I noticed was just overall listenability. This is good for newbies. It's easy to listen to, probably has some poppy song structures. It gets you acclimated to the pacing and the instrumentals that are being used. They probably don't have a lot of harsh vocals either. It's much more casual. You don't have to really think about it too much. The other trend that emerged that I noticed was, I just called it impressiveness because I didn't really have a better word for it, but this just would include anything that is maybe a little bit more intellectually challenging in terms of the themes and the song structures, probably more nerdy. It has a lot of musicians just flexing all over the place, and sometimes that's what you need. I've also tiered the bands that I'm going to talk about into 3 subcategories. There is safe for normies, getting your feet wet, and then actual good gateway extreme metal bands. Starting from the beginning with all the bands that are safe for normies, this is just any band that doesn't have really very harsh vocals. So it's not going to be this huge departure sonically from other genres of music that your friends may be listening to. Let's start with some classics. First up, we have the progenitors of metal music themselves. Black Sabbath is the first to ever do it. It's nice, it's spooky, and nobody can resist Ozzy's vocals. I mean, come on. Absolutely amazing songwriting, incredible musicianship, and it's actually pretty upbeat and fun for the most part. The first 4 to 5 albums that Metallica put out, depending on how cynical you are about the Black Album, are some of the best metal records ever produced. Metallica set the precedent for what it means to create good riffs and guitar solos. They have every claim to being the greatest metal band of all time, despite all that they have done to try to tarnish their legacy. As long as you stick with anything between Kill 'Em All and the Black Album, you'll be fine. These next few are for all the millennials trying to relive their glory days of the early 2000s. Despite all the memes of this band, it's actually pretty good music. The musicianship is surprisingly great. The songwriting is really unique. It's fun, it's unpredictable, it's quirky, it's horny, it's got some really unique harmonies in there too. Chino is just a very interesting fellow. Deftones said, fuck it, we don't need to know how to play guitar to make guitar sound good. Slipknot has enough aggressiveness for you to feel like a real true edgelord without being so overwhelming, and you still can understand the lyrics. The drums go absolutely crazy, and Slipknot is just so good at adding so much spectacle to their music. If something a little bit more progressive is more your style, Tool is a band that the nerds and the stoners can both get behind equally. They're one of the most progressive and high concept bands out there. They have a ton of groove, 2 vocalists that really contrast each other very well. They have one of the best drummers in the game, and they have some really truly beautiful compositions, as well as a really consistent discography that is just full of so many gems. There is just so much to explore with Dream Theater and their entire discography. They add orchestras to all sorts of different live shows and in their compositions on different albums. If you like some of that kind of progressive style sound, but you want something that's more going to inspire you to play some Dungeons and Dragons, I would recommend power metal. Dragonforce played such a pivotal role in the virality of Guitar Hero 3, and showing somebody that song, it's not the craziest instrumentals that you'll ever hear in your life, but it is a great way to introduce somebody to that impressive side of the Venn diagram. This band is for the fans of big operatic style vocals, synths, and songs that make you want to go play Dungeons and Dragons. Visigoth is good for fans of more traditional style power metal or fans of the Dark Souls series. They have 2 songs that are some of their best that are about Dark Souls 3. If you want something a little bit prettier, look no further than Lantelos with their song Lake Fantasy. It's just one of the prettiest metal songs that you'll probably ever hear. Hate them all you want, their music is catchy as hell, it has so many sing-along moments, and it's probably the best gateway band into the black metal side of extreme metal. If you're more of a fan of the instrumental side of things and you don't care about vocals at all, Animals as Leaders is a great choice. It's funky, it's genty, it's got a whole bunch of shit going on. Or you could check out Polyphia. It's basically pop songs except they replace the lyrics with just crazy guitar wizardry. Alright, now we're dipping our toes in. This has a little bit of harsh vocals in it. It's poppy, it's emo, it's aggro when it wants to be, but not all the time. It's got some really fun, beautifully written riffs, just don't read too deeply into the lyrics. Courtney LaPlante's ability to go from these high angelic vocals to deep demonic growls is just killer. They got some great breakdowns and enough harmony to satisfy any pop fan. Architects is great for the modern metalcore fan, or if you want to check out Josh Middleton, guitarist of Architects' better band, then you can go check out Sylosis. Sylosis has just absolutely no end to how many killer riffs they can write and put onto one record. Alright, let's go into some actual extreme metal bands that are good for the people who have gotten through those last couple of bands and have liked what they've heard so far. If you liked all that progressive stuff that we were talking about before, but you want a little bit more bite to it, look no further than Opeth. Opeth is absolutely gorgeously composed. Opeth perfectly utilizes this blend of deep guttural growls and beautiful composition without leaving the listener too whiplashed in the transition between those two. Gojira is just one of the best live bands of all time. They're heavy, they're powerful, they're technical. They have truly perfected the art of writing very angry music, and for all of the right reasons. Chuck Schuldinger's vocals are a little abrasive at first, but there's just no way you can resist those riffs. Rivers of Nihil is ambient, it's atmospheric, it's modern death metal with a hint of saxophone just sprinkled on top for flavor. For what my money's worth, I think Revocation has some of the best guitar solos ever written. They have a really perfect blend of thrash and death metal with just the perfect guitar tone to kind of ease somebody in from that thrash side into death metal. It is some of the most polished and well put together black and death metal, everything from 2000 until about 2018 at least. One listen through The Satanist will have you turning to the dark side in no time. And lastly, we have Meshuggah. This band will have any music nerd just frothing at the mouth with how technically complex and how well executed all of their music is. Some of the most talented musicianship on display that you will see anywhere in extreme metal. Well, here is where I landed in categorizing all the bands that I included. Animating all of the names into place simply would have taken too long to edit, so this is all you're gonna get. I think it's fine. Some of these you could argue could go anywhere, but I thought it was a fun idea regardless. Hopefully based on whatever bands you gravitate to or whoever you're showing the music to, this can kind of give you a roadmap of where to go next, and it spans a wide enough scope to where hopefully at least one of these recommendations will stick. The biggest caveat in all of this is obviously the other person has to be open to either exploring the new music in general or is just okay with you playing it around them. You kind of just gotta wait for that one song that clicks with them, if that's the case. If any of these do stick with you or your friends, please let me know. I'd love to hear any success stories after this, or any funny fail stories. And then lastly, let me know what bands got you all into metal. What was your gateway band?